Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, everyone. I rise to make my submission on the 2019 budget presentation delivered on Monday, 26th of November 2018, by the Minister of Finance, Honorable Winston Jordan. The largest budget presented to this August House to date, to the value of over $300 billion. But before I do, sir, I would like to comment on two submissions that Mr. Adams, or Honorable Mr. Adams, made earlier. First of all, sir, the region does not have the ability to employ the REO. That resides with the jurisdiction of the government. The REO carries out the mandate of the government, and second to that, the REO is the one who is the chairman of the Regional Procurement Board. And the problem within the regional bodies and even National Procurement Board is the single sourcing of contracts for items that are needed within the government structure. Secondly, sir, the most expensive feasibility that was ever done in this country, according to Honorable Irfaan Ali this morning, is that of the Demerara Harbor Bridge. Quite fine, we will be getting a 4-lane bridge, but look at what cost a feasibility that was done and then canceled to start all over again. Who paid that $150 million, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, people have dreams, and each day they hope that their dreams can come true, some through hard work and dedication, and others hope to win the lotto. All in all, sir, hopes and dreams are the things that keep people going. Mr. Speaker, the government, since it came into office in 2015, has excelled in its imposition of more than 200 taxes on this nation, more than anything else. And each day, it continues to shatter the dreams and hopes of our people. Sir, governments are not only expected to tax people at every opportunity, it is expected to create conditions for economic growth. It is expected to encourage and provide incentives for job creation for young people. It is expected to provide services and redistribute resources to the underprivileged, the elderly, the disabled, and the mentally challenged, including a more efficient healthcare systems for all. Mr. Speaker, what is life without promises? Like hopes and dreams, promises are made to be broken, and some say that promises are a comfort for fools. Mr. Speaker, the Guyanese people have spoken clearly in 2016 and again in November 2018 at the local government elections. Through their vote, the people have shown that they had enough of the government's facade and promises. Sir, the 2019 budget presentation is seen as nothing more than an electioneering propaganda with more empty promises. Mr. Speaker, this coalition have broken promises after promises, beginning with their 2015 election manifesto, and more than that, sir, their taxation has increased the hardship on our people, pushing them deeper into poverty while flaunting oil as the answer to all problems. Mr. Speaker, the promise of a good life continues to be a good lie again, an illusion that is like a bad dream that we wake up from. The 2019 budget has generated much discourse and disappointment across the country among peoples of all political persuasion, ethnicity, class, and geography. Some describe it as 105 pages of gaffe. Lots of words, lots of empty promises with no tangible relief for people, especially the poor and the vulnerable. I was impressed with the introduction of the budget presentation, so I listened intently and took a lot of notes at the beginning. I waited impatiently for the minister to outline measures to address some critical social issues that are plaguing our country, such as women's empowerment, single parents, the poor and the vulnerable, domestic violence, suicide and mental illnesses, to name a few. I wanted to hear the strategies that would create jobs, alleviate poverty, and reduce the margins of those living below the poverty line. Mr. Speaker, I waited in vain. Not a single word was mentioned. Not the word woman was not mentioned in that almost 4.5-hour speech. Not once did the minister spoke about women's empowerment, a plan to alleviate poverty among single parents, training for unskilled women and girls, plans to create awareness to reduce the scourge of domestic violence and death by domestic violence in our society. Sir, one would expect that since His Excellency President Granger on International Women's Day, March 8, 2016, committed his government to realizing 50-50 by 2030, that the minister would respectfully consider the President's promise to us, the women of this country, which makes up more than 50% of this country's human resources, by including measures in his budget to achieve the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Speaker, I would like to remind the government that Guyana signed and ratified the Convention on the Elimination on all forms of discrimination against women in July 1980. I would like to further remind the coalition government that the PNC was in government then and they signed and ratified this convention. And presently, sir, we have joined the rest of the world to mark the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence beginning on November 25th, ending on December 10th. At the beginning of this period, Mr. Speaker, on Tuesday, 27th of November 2018, a man chopped his female partner several times on her body at Swan Soosdijk Linden Highway and then hanged himself. The woman, mother of 7 children, received 2 emergency surgeries and several units of blood to save her life, but she lost 3 fingers on one hand and was in a critical condition at GPHC. Sir, 14 women were killed in 2017 and 22 has been killed so far for this year. A few of the perpetrators even killed themselves by committing suicide. Sir, the problems associated with domestic violence in Guyana has been escalated by the present state of employment and economic hardships on our families, compounded by alcoholism and power struggles between couples. This major social problem cannot be ignored because each life lost from domestic gender-related problems is one too many. The budget did not address this issue, sir, much less outline strategies to eradicate it from our society. I would like to ask the Minister to ensure that adequate funding is made available to the Ministry of Social Protection to create awareness of this issue across Guyana so that it can be reduced and then eradicated. Sir, we are all aware that most women stay in abusive relationships because of financial dependency and because they have nowhere to go with their children. The Interim Poverty Reduction Strategy paper of 2000 stated that almost 50,000 families were single-parent-headed households, most of whom were women. Sir, most of those single parents were unskilled, not highly educated, and could not secure well-paid jobs. A survey done in 2007 by former Minister Priya Manichan confirmed the above, and she immediately put several measures in place to improve the livelihood of single-parent families. Some of those measures were the Capacity Building for Skills Advancement Training Program by the Guyana Women's Leadership Institute, Non-Traditional Skills Training for Women by the Board of Industrial Training, the Women of Work Program, and several others. During the last years, women's empowerment has reached an all-time low. So I would like to call on the Minister of Social Protection, Honorable Amna Ali, who has responsibility for gender affairs, to step up to the game. to put plans and programs in place to meet international obligations and local needs, and to demand that women's issues are placed high on government's agenda. There is the urgent need to develop programs to create awareness among our women and men that violence is not the answer to domestic problems and death is certainly not the solution. The Gender Affairs Bureau, then Women's Affairs Bureau, had established women's desks at the regional Democratic Council offices in several regions. This process must continue until all 10 offices have women's desks, which must be managed by social workers, and its work to be monitored to ensure maximum output. Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage the Minister of Social Protection to consider the establishment of women's desks at each NDC across our country to provide easier access to persons within the local authority areas who will refer them to the probation department for further intervention when needed. Children attending school must be taught that conflicts can be resolved through communication and negotiations, and not through aggression, threats, fistfights with knives or guns. The promise of guidance counselors in our schools must not, sir, remain a pipe dream. Mr. Speaker, it must become a reality. Children sometimes need to speak to an impartial person rather than their teachers or their parents. This person must have the requisite psychosocial skills to help them through their pre- and adolescent years. Speak to teachers or check Facebooks, and one can find videos of our children brawling on the street corners in their uniform. On several occasions, I have personally witnessed this in the streets of Georgetown. Mr. Speaker, Guyana continues to remain high on the suicide statistics of the world. I am not sure which ministry has the responsibility for this social problem, because everybody is speaking about it, that affect families throughout the coastland of Guyana. The National Suicide Prevention Plan issued by the Ministry of Public Health identified poverty, mental illness, access to lethal chemicals, alcohol misuse, interpersonal violence, family dysfunction, and insufficient mental health resources as key factors that causes suicide. Further, sir, the Ministry of Public Security records show that approximately 70% of suicide occurs in rural communities because people turn to alcohol to cope with feelings of hopelessness, poverty, and economic despair. Research suggested that while there is no support system for persons with suicide ideation or mental illnesses, there are plenty of illegal rum shops around the country, and drinking alcohol is a popular pastime. Further, Mr. Speaker, can you imagine what is going on with those families whose breadwinners were thrown out of their jobs after 2015? Family dysfunction and gender-based violence are not the only factors that are contributing to the high rates of suicide in Guyana. Unemployment is also a predominant factor. Mr. Speaker, attempt suicide continues to be a criminal act in Guyana. And guess what? The suicide hotline is run by the police. Do you believe that persons with suicide ideation will call the hotline for help? Of course not. Figures released by WHO in April of 2017 suggested that Guyana has the third highest suicide rate in the world. That means we are going more. Sir, it is also heartening to note that among our youths between the ages of 15 and 24, suicide is the second leading cause of death in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, anyone can purchase rat poison, ant or fly bait on the pave in the city, or they can purchase weedicide and pesticide at village shops in the agriculture-based villages. To minimize suicide by poisoning, adults must be sold such poisonous substances which must be stored in a secure place. Only awareness can help to stop or reduce this. Mr. Speaker, we can never forget September 2018, the story of a 9-year-old boy from Lagrange village who bought rat poison at a village shop and whose baby brother ingested it and subsequently died. That was such a sad situation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage those ministries with responsibilities to work harder to provide help to those individuals, families, communities suffering with suicide ideation or death by suicide. Therefore, I ask that funding be made available to create awareness that suicide is not the answer, that life is worth living. Mr. Speaker, sugar workers from Whale Estate received their severance after almost 2 years of despair. The workers at other estates
Remember, you have 5 minutes remaining.
are waiting for their severance. Mr. Speaker, these workers work for their money. Government is not giving them or doing them any favor. Mr. Speaker, engagements with workers revealed that they were severed from their work, and if they have not been able to have 750 contributions, they are not entitled to pension. I am asking this Honorable House to consider that those persons be paid percentage of their NIS pension based on the contributions that they have paid to NIS. Mr. Speaker, very little remains a secret in the world of science and technology, where everyone has a smartphone. And what is covered up eventually see the light. In Guyana, we have one of the best public health systems in this part of the world. The PPP civic government built it from backwardness into one of the most modern healthcare systems that we have. I always recommend this system to people. Mr. Speaker, when taxpayers' monies are paid to provide healthcare for people, there should not be any shortages of drugs and equipment with that amount of money. Mr. Speaker, not having adequate drugs and medical supplies in hospitals paled in comparison to a mother after carrying her baby for 9 months, then delivering that baby, it dies. I am not a medical person, but I am a social worker, and I am saying that babies do not have to die. I am saying that the neonatal ICUs across the country should be fully equipped to provide effective care for premature babies or babies born with complications. I am also saying that after delivery, mothers don't have to die. I am therefore appealing to the Minister of Public Health, who is a mother herself, to pay personal attention to what is taking place in the maternity departments across this country. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that if a pregnant mother goes to the hospital in labor pain and she is only dilated by 2 centimeters, they send her away? Who is going to tell that woman at home that you're now dilated to 3 centimeters, go back to the hospital and deliver your baby? The stress of going home and coming back, do you know the amount of complications that can arise? Baby and mother both can die. This happened recently at Georgetown Hospital. And recently at Best Hospital, the young woman who gave birth to twins, both babies died.
I'll remember you have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I commend the minister for thinking about people who are suffering from disabilities, but his budget only speaks about those who can afford to buy vehicles to transport their relatives to and from hospitals or wherever they have to go. What happened to those who need prosthesis? What happens to those who need braces? What happened to people who suffer from spinal injuries and need some kind of support? Those people make up the majority of this nation with disabilities who cannot afford to purchase such a vehicle. I therefore suggest to the Minister of Finance to go back to the drawing board and give that same tax exemption to taxi services who provide services to ordinary people to get them from place to place. I would like to propose also to the Minister of Finance to make more funding available to the difficult circumstances unit to help those in need to purchase these prostheses and braces, sir. Because the difficult circumstances only give partial funding to purchase such things that the persons need. Sir, realizing hope. Hope for all Guyanese is not a promise of oil. When oil comes, it should be redistributed to improve the lives of everyone. Realizing hope is about creating conditions that give all the opportunities to realize their dreams. Realizing hope is about allowing people to live free from discrimination and be able to provide for their families. It's about owning a plot of land, getting a loan, build a house, have a job, repay your loan, and take care of your families. It's about working and building without fear that someone will invade your house and steal from you everything that you work so hard for. Thank you, sir.